It's been a common conversation topic on this channel and something that I talk about a lot in my Navigating Self program that I run, and that's knowing thyself, right? The power in knowing thyself, and how important that is for us just as characters on this journey, right, of understanding ourselves more and more beyond these bodies, but also how that starts impacting your life when you actually know these things about yourself. You know, that having that clarity on why you are the way that you are and the things that have made you that way, the things that you were born with, but also the things that you've developed, to give us a bit of understanding and clarity on what we're actually working with as people, right? And in many ways, this makes life easier. Sure, it might be a little bit deep at times on that journey of going in, and it might cut a bit deep, the things that you've picked up, or there's things that you don't like about yourself, or even just things that you struggle with, right? But once you know this, you know what you're working with, you know what you want to overcome. You know what you're working with within your character, and you know what you are, your strengths, your weaknesses, and what you can use in your life and actually focus on in your life. And that might come down to your businesses and the projects you run, or the way you approach life, right? When you actually start getting to the point where you're uncovering these things and you've got that clarity, it can be huge for actually understanding your life, and it stops you wandering aimlessly, wondering what it's all about. It's a big thing for why we're here. But knowing thyself also allows you to have a little bit of empathy for yourself, because it's that understanding. You begin to understand that you are that way, the things that you want to work with and work upon and overcome, but also the things to accept. And when you start sort of getting to that point, you think, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. You begin to have a bit more empathy for yourself, which is a good place to be, right? A little bit of acceptance, and also the direction of what you want to overcome and focus on. But empathy is a big one that comes from this. You sort of get to that point and think, oh yeah, bless me for that way, and that I'm here to overcome that particular challenge, right? And this is a good thing. And we also start to gain empathy for others. We sort of see other people in a different light. Once we have been on that journey, or are on that journey of uncovering our true self, we start to see it in other people, and that starts making sense. And we see it in other people, not in a place of judgment and in judging them, but more so understanding them. It sort of begins to make a bit more sense, and you can see where they're coming from and why, and we can end up having that empathy for others, also being grateful for who we are, the goods and the bads. We're grateful for that, and we also then gain empathy for others and what we can see that they're overcoming, and what are things for them, big things for them, because it's different for all of us, right? This is what's fascinating, and why I say about knowing yourself, because it is different to everyone else. You'll notice that, like, the things that you've got to overcome, the things that are hard for you or challenging for you, and also the things that come easy to you and your strengths, are different to other people's, right? And that's why we can then have empathy for ourselves, and also begin to see it in others, that maybe their wounds or challenges or character traits that they're overcoming and working with are so different to ours, that we can have empathy for that and admire them for that and everything else, right? And that seeing it in other people, once you start seeing it in yourself, or seeing things in yourself, you can start seeing it in other people. It ties it into like how others are just a mirror of ourselves, and what we see in others is a mirror of ourselves, right? In many ways, pretty much everyone we meet, we learn something from, in some way. Sometimes it's more obvious than other times, but especially like key relationships, not just romantic relationships, but there's key relationships in our lives that really do mirror lessons and traits back to us, that if you're aware of it, you can really start, again, having more understanding on this. And it kind of makes sense that why people upset each other in many ways. In some ways, it feels unavoidable. It's bound to happen in relationships, as I said, not just romantic ones, but those we meet, friends or characters in our life that we learn things from, the goods and the bads. And it makes sense that it's through others that we have these challenges brought up, or these triggers, let's say, it's quite a cliche word, but triggers and wounds brought up. Like, how else would we learn these things so quickly if it wasn't for others showing us them or pulling them out of us? And it can be difficult, right? And this again can be in fleeting relationships or fleeting situations and encounters with people. Or we also know that it can be quite common that people have a particular character in their life that shows them this time and time again, that pulls this wound up in them time and time again. And that also makes sense, right? It's just like, they're here to teach us that lesson, and through that relationship with them we get shown that thing time and time again until we've made peace with it, understood it, learned from it, and overcome. Right? It makes sense. These people are mirrors for us to learn and reflect on ourselves more, and it's through these wounds and challenges and navigating relationships and what we see in others and what they mirror back to us about ourselves that we learn ourselves more deeply. It ties back into knowing thyself. And that understanding means that we end up having more empathy for ourselves and understanding for ourselves and why we are that way, and even more empathy for them, why they are that way, where they're coming from, you know? It's perfect as it is. Although we have these moments of difficulty in understanding why that person is the way that they are. But what's that show you about you? And what's the lesson to uncover there within you? And what's it reflecting back to you? They've got their different perspective. They're coming from a different angle. It makes sense we all see things differently because we're all coming from these different angles. But what can we learn from that? If not just a little bit of understanding. It kind of makes sense, right? It makes sense. They see it that way. And then we learn from that what is mirroring back from us. Mirroring back to us. And we also can accept and understand that we're mirroring things for them that they're learning from, they maybe not like about us, or they might find challenging about us. But having that understanding and clarity on that it is this way and we can learn from each other in the best way, and it's a fast track in many ways to bring up all these things about ourselves that sometimes we don't see, sometimes they're hidden, and it's through others that we're mirrored it back. And it's through that we end up knowing ourselves more deeply, having empathy for ourselves, because we understand it, why it is, what we're working with, and why we have that. That then ties back into us understanding that, bless them as well. You know, they're working with certain things and overcoming certain things that I can now see in them that they're showing me. And I have empathy for them, that they're on this path of overcoming those things, just like I'm on this path overcoming the things that I am. These challenges that we have in relationships and encounters with different people are really a gift. Once we can see that we're learning and gaining so much from it in character growth and in character understanding of ourselves. And when you get to that point of acceptance, more empathy comes for yourself and for others. And as I said, the more you uncover these things about yourself, the more you actually begin to see them in others, and that makes sense. Understanding comes then as well. I'm like, okay. End up being really grateful. Thank you for showing me that. Thank you. That was a blind spot. Or if it wasn't for a character like you, I don't know when and how I would have learned that lesson so abruptly or so clearly. And if it wasn't for a character for you, I don't know what else would have brought that thing up in me so regularly or time and time again, until I saw it clearly, understood it clearly, and began to work with it and overcome it, or at least understand it. Our relationships with others are real mirrors, and we mirror back to other people things that we're probably oblivious of most of the time. It's quite comical in many ways when you see it from that angle. But it makes sense that we pull this stuff out of each other, again, sometimes without realising it. You know, it doesn't always end up in an argument or something like that. It's things that we all feel inside. And sometimes it's more subtle than other times, right? Sometimes a relationship is not about wounds per se, it's about strengths. And you pull that out of each other, you encourage each other in that way. It's actually more positive and easier and light-hearted and fun. But it also makes sense that that's balanced out with characters and lessons that we're here to learn that others show us, and we see through others about ourselves that way. But yeah, knowing yourself or knowing ourselves more deeply and uncovering those things in itself does bring about some empathy for yourself, and having empathy for yourself, because you understand that, okay, I've got this that I'm overcoming, and understand it, and bless me for having that as a lesson here to overcome, or a wound to overcome. And that does eventually lead to you seeing it more and more in others, or other lessons that other people have that you don't necessarily have here as a problem or as a challenge, you know. But you start seeing other people thinking, wow, they're working with that set of rules or certain game that they've got going on, that they're trying to work out and figure out their relationship with. And it also makes sense that we highlight these things in each other through our different characters, through our different angles and perspectives. It's good to be aware of this. It does just bring more understanding, more clarity, and then more empathy for ourselves and others. It's a true gift. In many ways, it's through our relationships that we get fast-tracked on this journey of growth and understanding ourselves more. Peace.